Hey guys, Tiff here of True Crime with Tiff Klein. Welcome to episode 10. 10. I can't believe I'm on episode 10. I started this podcast journey in September when I got back from CrimeCon in Denver, which, by the way, was the best experience of my life. I wanted to do a podcast for a long time, and it really kicked into gear when I did a Zoom with Gabby Petito's mom, Nikki, and then I met our friend who helped us. He has a podcast now called Grief is Not a Dirty Word. And he helped me figure out what I needed to do, what kind of software, what kind of equipment I needed. And then my brother, with the tech savvy that he is and having a degree in technology and music, he helped me find the right equipment for my budgets and then FaceTimed me and walked me through everything to hook up. So thank you to everybody who helped me. And thank you to you guys for tuning in every week. I hit 352 downloads this morning. And I know that's not a lot to some, but for me, hey, I'm excited. That's awesome. Thank you. I can see where people tune in from, different countries, different states, different cities. So it's pretty cool. And it means the world to me that you tune in. And I hope you continue. And please share my podcast with other people and give me a rating, an honest rating, and an honest review. I'd greatly appreciate it. It's on Apple. It's on Spotify. Works when it wants to. So with that being said, let's get started on episode 10. Now, this one is an old case. This one is a cold case. This one is probably the most known cold case of all true crime history. Everybody knows what this case is. It's JonBenét Ramsey. It is the case I've been following since it happened in 1996. We're on year 29 since JonBenét was taken from us. And I got to meet John Ramsey at CrimeCon in Denver back in September. And he was very sweet. And whatever your opinion, I'm not here to sway your opinion on what you think happened in that house. I'm not here to point fingers at anybody. I'm not here to give you my theory on what I think happened. I'm just going to give you facts, and you can do what you want with that. I did meet him. Like I said, he was very sweet. He signed the book he wrote with Patsy. And I did, I guess, do a non-verbal meeting with Burke. We looked at each other, smiled, and it was just a non-verbal hello. He is tall. He is just Burke. And he was there to support his dad. And I about shit my pants when I was sitting at a table in the back of the bar in Denver in the Gaylord Rockies Resort. And I was with Tara Petito and Nikki Schmidt and Jazz from Missing in America and Candace Cooley, Dylan Round's mom, and we were all having some martinis. And I looked to my right, and Justin the Nick of Crime was there too. And I looked at Justin and Nikki, and I'm like, "Is that Burke?" And they're like, "Yep." And I'm like, I bet I literally almost shit my pants because Burke's not one to really put himself out there. And I mean, who can blame him? And he had a woman with him. I'm not sure if it's his wife, girlfriend, whatever. And then he had security. He had one guy, and then his father, John, and then John's wife. And it was surreal. I was just like, holy shit, that's Burke Ramsey. Like a kid I've only ever seen on TV. I think he's my age or a year older. I think he's a year older than me. And I was just shocked. So immediately my brain goes to, oh my God, is he going to be on the Q&A panel tomorrow? But unfortunately, he didn't speak with John and Paula Woodward. But I did see him, and I guess that's pretty cool. And again, whatever your thoughts are on that, that's your opinion. And I'm not going to get into name blaming because I wasn't there. And Burke had already sued CBS for $750 million for defamation. And I'm not going down that road. So whatever you think, whatever you feel, your opinions are valid. You're heard. Okay. You're respected. I'm just going to stay away from that. So let's get to it. So again, I remember JonBenét's case happening when I was 8 years old. And I remember going into the grocery store and seeing her on every magazine with her big blonde curls and her pearly white smile and the tiara on her head. And then some magazines were exploiting her, with her little cowgirl dress on and all her beauty pageants. And I just remember seeing her. But when I was 8, it didn't really connect, that she was brutally murdered the way she was, because they don't really, when you're 8, you don't really process that. You just see a little girl with a tiara and you really ignore everything else. And it was just a case that always intrigued me. And it's not to sensationalize it. It's not to romanticize it. It's just, how can one police department fuck up so bad And again, there's lots of errors in this case. There's lots of name blaming. There's lots of screw ups from all parties. There's the whole case, not just the police department, not just John and Patsy, not Burke, not, everybody that was involved. The whole case got fucked up from the second it happened. And pardon my French, but it's so frustrating because, this little girl did not deserve this. Nobody was there except the people who were there. And everyone says the evidence is right in front of you. But, I didn't go to school for forensics. I didn't go to school for police academy to be a detective or a CSI or anything like that. So what does my opinion matter to those people? I don't know shit according to them. I'm going off of hearsay. I'm going off of only what the media has shown us. And that is a whole nother subject in itself. But it's just one case I really want, and I would hope with 2026 being the 30th anniversary, I hope they close it. I hope they figure it out. I know things are moving faster now. That technology and genealogy and DNA things have improved dramatically in the past few years. And now that some evidence was finally submitted over from the Boulder Police Department to private detective labs, I'm eager to see what 2026 holds for JonBenet. And, and regardless on your thought of John Ramsey, so he can have some closure. I will say this. I don't think John Ramsey did it. I don't think John Ramsey played a part in it. I just don't. And I'm gonna leave it there because I don't want anything I'm saying misinterpreted. But I will say I do not think John did it with his own hands. I don't think John paid people to do it. I don't think John helped anybody do it. And I don't think he staged it with anybody. And that's all I'm gonna say. So on Christmas night, 1990, in Boulder, Colorado, a tragedy unfolded that would grip America for decades. JonBenét Patricia Ramsey, a 6-year-old beauty pageant contestant, was found dead in her family's home. Nearly 30 years later, her case remains unsolved, surrounded by theories, missteps, and haunting questions. Today, we will walk through the timeline of events, the investigation, and the lasting impact of this case. JonBenét Ramsey was born on August 6, 1990, in Atlanta, Georgia. Her full name was JonBenét Patricia Ramsey. She was born in Northside Hospital in Atlanta, Georgia. Born to the parents of JonBenét Ramsey and Patricia Patsy Ramsey, her first name was a creative blend of her father's names, JonBenet, hence JonBenét. In her early life, the family moved to Boulder when JonBenét was about a year old, and she grew up and began competing in child beauty pageants. Her father, JonBenét Ramsey, was born December 7th, 1943, with a background as a successful businessman, president of Access Graphics, a computer service company in Boulder. He had 3 children from his first marriage, John Andrew, Melinda, and Elizabeth, who died in 1992, and 2 children with Patsy, Burke, and JonBenet. The role he played in this case was that he found JonBenet's body in the basement wine cellar on December 26, 1996. He has consistently maintained his family's innocence and continues to advocate for advanced DNA testing to solve the case. Now, going back to CrimeCon, when I was overhearing some conversations, and I heard some pretty logical statements from verified sources that said, if somebody was that guilty and they did something, why the hell would they keep it in the spotlight for 30 years and keep the focus on them? Bingo. That's one reason why I don't think John Ramsey has anything to do with it. If his evidence, or if his DNA was all over the evidence and he was suspect, which he was exonerated in 2008, but if he had anything to do with it, I don't think the man would have kept it in the spotlight for 30 years. I'm just saying, I just don't. Usually when people are guilty, they don't want the spotlight on them. So JonBenet's mother, Patricia Patsy Ramsey, she was born December 29th, 1956. She was a former beauty queen crowned Miss West Virginia in 1977. She married John in 1980, and she's the mother to Burke and JonBenet. Patsy was the one who discovered the ransom note on the morning of December 26, 1996, and called 911. She was heavily scrutinized due to her involvement in JonBenet's pageant life and inconsistencies in her statements. Years later, Patsy battled ovarian cancer and passed away in 2006 at the age of 49. The Ramseys were a prominent Boulder family, active in their church and social circle. Their parenting style, especially Patsy's, became a focal point in the media coverage because she put her daughter in pageants. Both parents were placed under suspicion early in the investigation, but were formally cleared in 2008 after DNA testing excluded them. JonBenet's biological full brother, Burke. Burke is JonBenét Ramsey's older brother, born in 1987. He was 9 years old when JonBenét was murdered in 1996. And his life since has been shaped by this tragedy, intense public scrutiny, and his choice to live privately. Burke was asleep in the Ramsey home on the night JonBenét was killed. He was questioned by police and interviewed multiple times as a child, even without his parents present on December 26th. Referring back to Unsolved, the JonBenét book by Paula Woodward. Some theories suggested that Burke might have been involved, but DNA evidence and investigations cleared him of suspicion. His parents, John and Patsy, consistently, and still do, defend against his speculations. He's made media appearances. He has largely avoided the spotlight for years. But in 2016, he gave a rare interview on Dr. Phil. Now, you all remember that interview where he was grinning and smiling, and everyone's like, he's off, something's off with him. Why is he smiling? His daughter was murdered. Why does he look like he's just laughing and making a joke about it all? Oh, he has to be autistic because nobody acts that way, and just ripping him apart on TV. So he went on Dr. Phil, and there's a line that he says, look at the evidence or the lack thereof. And he's basically calling out, like, prove it to me. Prove it to me that I did it, and then we'll talk. I mean, that's really what he's saying. He appeared calm on the show, but again, he was criticized by some viewers for seeming detached. However, psychologists noted that this could be a coping mechanism developed from childhood trauma. He has declined to participate in more recent documentaries, including Netflix's 2024 series, citing mistrust on the media and online speculation. So I don't blame the kid not wanting to talk, not wanting to put himself out there, because anything he says is going to they're going to spiral out of control because that's what he says. He doesn't trust the media because he's seen it his whole life. Burke has also, when he was a kid, he was evaluated by a child psychologist a few days after it happened. He drew pictures, but he drew a picture of JonBenét up in heaven. And then he said that life goes on, basically, when he was questioned if he's sad. And he was just like, life goes on. So, I'm paraphrasing. They asked him what he thought happened, and he thinks someone came in with a hammer and hit her in the head. He said he wasn't afraid to be at home, so he didn't feel unsafe in his own home. He claims he was asleep when all of this happened, and John and Patsy said the same thing. He was seen at the funeral spinning around and smiling, and people thought that was weird too. I mean, again, your opinion's your opinion, but you have to also think childhood trauma and ways kids can disassociate and compartmentalize things is very different than adults. It may not have set in at that moment for Burke, and I'm sure in his private moments he thinks about things and reflects, and he only had JonBenét for 6 years, so she was his sister, but she didn't play this huge significant role in his life for years to come. In his adult life, Burke studied computer science, and he's worked as a software engineer, keeping a low profile. He lives privately, away from Boulder, and avoids public discussions of the case. He has occasionally pursued legal action against media outlets that suggested he was responsible for JonBenét's death. In 2016, he filed a defamation lawsuit against CBS over a documentary that implied his public perception. Burke remains a figure of fascination because of his proximity to the crime. Despite being cleared, conspiracy theories continue to circulate online. His decision to stay private reflects both the trauma of losing his sister and the relentless public speculation surrounding the case. Yes, Burke sued CBS in 2016 for defamation after the network aired a documentary suggesting that he killed his sister. The case was settled in 2019 for an undisclosed amount, but if you do your research, it's about $750 million. Wow. The lawsuit. In the background, September 2016, CBS aired a 2-part docuseries called The Case of JonBenét Ramsey. And again, the program featured forensic experts who theorized that Burke, then 9 years old, may have accidentally killed JonBenet and that the parents had staged a cover-up. Burke's response, again, he filed a $750 million defamation lawsuit in Wayne County, Michigan against CBS, the production company, and several individuals involved. Burke argued that the documentary falsely portrayed him as the killer, damaging his reputation and causing emotional distress. He is JonBenet's only full sibling, and he is the son of John and Patsy. He was 9 years old at the time of JonBenet's death. So even if he did, I'm not saying he did, if he did, he was under the age of 10 and he couldn't have been tried as an adult. And I believe even if the conspiracy theories are right and he came out now and said, yes, he did it or knew or had some kind of involvement in it, the statute of limits, I believe, and because he was under the age of 10 in the state of Colorado, there's nothing that can be done. Again, I'm saying if. I didn't say he did. I'm not saying he did it. I'm not saying that it was him. I'm just saying if he did. It happened so long ago. So he has largely stayed out of the public eye, though he, like I said, he did give interviews years later to defend his family. And I'm thinking that's why he was at CrimeCon, to support his father and just to be there. And I know the day before John Ramsey spoke at CrimeCon, they were in Boulder at the police department and they were getting things released to have tested. So that's amazing news. JonBenet also has an older half-brother. A lot of people don't talk about John Andrew Ramsey, born in 1976. He is the half-brother, and John Ramsey had him with his first marriage to Lucinda Posh. He was in college at the time of JonBenet's murder. She also had an older half-sister, Melinda Ramsey Long, born in 1971. She's the half-sister from John's first marriage as well. She pursued a career in medicine and has kept a very low profile. And then JonBenet had another half-sister, Elizabeth Pash Ramsey, born in 1969 and passed away in 1992. She tragically died in a car accident at the age of 22, 4 years before JonBenet's murder. So not only did John Ramsey lose JonBenet, 4 years prior, he lost Elizabeth. JonBenet was the youngest of the Ramsey children, born in 1990. Her blended family, siblings from her father's first marriage, and her full brother Burke was often mentioned in media coverage. The surviving siblings, especially Burke and John Andrew, have occasionally spoken publicly about the case, but most have chosen privacy. I don't think I've ever seen a clip or a documentary of her sister Melinda speaking. I don't think I've ever seen that. And if I'm wrong, please send it to me because I'm intrigued. John Andrew Ramsey and Melinda Ramsey, John's adult children with his first marriage, were both investigated early in the JonBenet case, and their alibis were quickly established and confirmed. At the time, John Andrew was 23, and he was traveling with his girlfriend on December 25th through the 26th of 1996. His alibi was that he was in Atlanta, Georgia, preparing to fly to Michigan to meet his father and the rest of his family for Christmas. Airline records, witness statements, and law enforcement confirmed he was not in Boulder at the time of JonBenet's death. There have been neighbors that have claimed they saw him walking up the hill or up the street the night before JonBenet died, but again, his alibi checks out. Now, Melinda Ramsey, JonBenet's older half-sister. At the time, she was 26. She was also in Atlanta, Georgia, spending the holiday with her mother, John's first wife. She was with relatives during the critical hours of JonBenet's murder. Family members and travel records corroborated her presence in Atlanta. Both John Andrew and Melinda were cleared very early in the investigation. Their alibis were solid, with multiple witnesses and records confirming they were not in Boulder. Despite the suitcase in the basement belonging to John Andrew, now the suitcase is the photo we've seen that was placed under the window in the basement that Detective Lou Smit said was probably used to get out of the window. Despite the suitcase in the basement belonging to John Andrew, investigators determined he had no involvement. He wasn't even in Colorado. There was also a boot print, a high-tech boot print on that suitcase, what they think. They outlined it. There was also a high-tech boot case in the mold on the cellar floor where JonBenet was found, and it was also on the back of a toilet cover I just discovered in the book Paula Woodward wrote. So back to business. The Ramseys spent Christmas evening, December 25th, 1996, with their close friends Fleet and Priscilla White. The White's home in Boulder, Colorado. Before we dive deeper into the investigation, it's important to pause and remember that JonBenet not as a case file, but as a little girl, a 6-year-old with dreams, laughter, and favorite pastimes that made her childhood sparkle. JonBenet loved simple childhood activities. She enjoyed playing with friends, riding her bike, spending time with her pets, and doing arts and crafts alongside her pageant performances. Playtime with friends and brother Burke, she liked games such as tag and hide and seek. With arts and crafts, she enjoyed painting and creative projects, often encouraged by her mother, Patsy. Music and performing, singing and dancing were her favorite pastimes, which naturally tied into her pageant routines. She loved animals and had a pet dog, spending time caring for and playing with them. She loved riding her bike, and playing outside were part of her everyday fun. Now, there's a clip I've seen John Ramsey say a few times where they got her a new bike for Christmas that year. And before they were going to the Whites to have Christmas dinner, she wanted to ride it into the alley behind the house and take a stroll on this new bike. And John Ramsey said, let's just go. You can do it tomorrow. And then he's like, tomorrow never came. So that's one of the memories that sticks out in his mind. She loved riding her bike. JonBenet won multiple child beauty pageants before her death in 1996. She began competing in child beauty pageants at a very young age, encouraged by her mother, who herself had been a former beauty queen. By the age of 6, she had already won several local, state, and national titles, making her a rising star in the child pageant circuit. Her success in pageants contributed to the intense media focus after her murder, as images of her in costumes and crowns were widely circulated. These contests showcased her charisma and stage presence, but they also became part of the broader cultural conversation about child beauty competitions in the wake of her death. Some of the titles that JonBenet had won: it's Colorado State All-Star Kids Cover Girl, America's Royal Miss, Little Miss I'm sorry, this is French if I'm not pronouncing it right, Little Miss Charlevoix, I'm not exactly sure how you pronounce that, National Tiny Miss Beauty, Little Miss Colorado, Little Miss Christmas. The details of 1996 Christmas. December 23rd, 1996, the Ramseys hosted a large holiday party at their own home with about 30 guests. Former journalism professor Bill McReynolds dressed as Santa Claus for the children. Now, the Santa has also been targeted from the media and couch detectives and online sleuths that he could have possibly been a suspect because JonBenet was telling people that Santa was coming to see her early and that she was special. And he was coming just to see her, and she gave Santa this bottle of sparkles, I believe. I guess his wife had wrote a book about a little girl that was killed in a basement, and people were losing their minds saying it was Santa, but I believe he was ruled out. December 24th, 1996, the family attended a twilight service at St. John's Church in Boulder. December 25th, 1996, which is Christmas Day, the Ramseys joined their friends Fleet and Priscilla White for Christmas dinner at the Whites' home. The Whites' involvement is significant because they were among the first outsiders at the Ramsey home on December 26th after Patsy called 911. The presence at both the dinner and later the crime scene has been scrutinized in theories and investigative accounts. The Christmas dinner timeline helps establish JonBenet's last known social interaction outside her immediate family. On Christmas night, the Ramseys had dinner with Fleet and Priscilla White before returning home, where JonBenet was later put to bed and tragically killed. Fleet White was a close friend of John and later became a controversial figure in the case due to his outspoken criticism of the investigation. After dinner, the Ramseys returned home, putting John to bed around 9 p.m. and prepared for their planned trip to Michigan the next morning. Now, again, they were supposed to leave the next day on the 26th. Patsy, John, Burke, JonBenet, Melinda, and John Andrew. December 25th, 1996, the night of the crime, the Ramseys family celebrated Christmas at home after attending a party earlier in the evening. JonBenet was put to bed around 9 o'clock in her upstairs bedroom, and then the morning of December 26th arrived. Patsy Ramsey discovered a ransom note demanding $118,000. The ransom note in the JonBenet Ramsey case was a 2.5-page written letter found inside the Ramsey home on the morning of December 26, 1996. It demanded $118,000 and has been one of the most controversial pieces of evidence in the case. Now, I do remember seeing a documentary where Patsy said, "Somebody that knew me knows that I come down those stairs every morning." Now, the spiral staircase that goes into the kitchen, I believe, was on the same side of JonBenét's bedroom. So they have a huge house and there's 3 floors. And the second floor was John Andrews' bedroom, who really didn't ever stay there, but he had a bedroom. And then it was turned into Patsy's hospice room or cancer treatment room. Next to that was JonBenét's bedroom, and she had a big balcony that went outside. Next to her bedroom was Melinda's bedroom, who again didn't live there but had a room to stay. And then it was Burke's. And Burke had a staircase going downstairs and upstairs to the third bedroom, the third floor. And JonBenet had staircases that went down to the kitchen and then up to the third floor. And then up on the third floor, you have a master suite that was John and Patsy. And everybody says that when you go into that house, you can't hear things on that third floor. Like it's such a big house and it's hard to hear anything. Screams, loud noises. I mean, but again, a neighbor said they thought they heard a scream in the middle of the night. It was really loud and then it just went silent. So I don't know how Burke didn't hear that, if it happened in JonBenét's room, but it could have happened in the basement. And I think that's what Detective Lou Smit said, that they tested something out in the basement with a vent that went outside. And that's why the neighbor heard it, but Patsy and John and Burke didn't. That's just what I read and what I've watched. So yeah, the spiral staircase comes down into the kitchen. Patsy finds a 2.5-page ransom note and she glances over it. She doesn't read the whole thing. She runs back upstairs. She gets John, wakes him up. He throws his clothes on, comes downstairs. Now, Patsy's already fully clothed, wearing the same thing she did the day before. Now, a lot of people pointed that out as suspect too, because she never wore the same thing twice. And it's not like her etiquette to rewear something she wore the day before. But hey, I've done it. I'm sure, you grab something. It's 4:30 in the morning. You're cold. You want to go downstairs and get your coffee, whatever. Maybe she wanted to wear that same outfit to Michigan because who cares? Okay, who cares? If she never changed and she still had the same clothes on, that's a plausible, that could have happened too. So she goes upstairs, she gets John Ramsey, he threw his clothes on, he comes downstairs, he's reading the ransom note with her, and he soon realizes JonBenet is missing. And then hell breaks loose. From there on out, it's hell that broke loose. They call 911. And she's saying that there's been a kidnapping and her daughter is missing and she's the mother, which was always a weird term. I am the mother, not I am her mother. She's freaking out. And they said that they're going to send people over, So they're dealing with all that. And I will read you the note if I can find it. Sometimes it's hard to find online and it's hard to read because of the handwriting. And they did do a handwriting analysis with Patsy. And her handwriting was voted 4 out of 5, being, I think they said 1 was the closest, 5 was the least. But hers matched more than anybody else's. I think out of 64 people, hers came to be the closest, but they never really did anything with it. There was never any charges or confirmation that it was Patsy. But again, keep in mind, in 2008, the whole family was exonerated. And you think being online, you'd be able to find the damn note in full? I should have had this prepared, but I don't know where it's at. Actually, you know what? I have my book from Paula Woodward, who has the ransom note in it. Thank you, Paula Woodward. Actually, guys, the book Unsolved, the JonBenét Ramsey murder 25 years later, which it's 29 now. She wrote this awesome book, and it's after the murder of JonBenet. Rumors and misinformation planned by Boulder law enforcement sped rapidly around the world. Suspicion immediately fell on the family as police sought to exploit her death in the media. Prosecutors and law enforcement intentionally manipulated existing evidence and ignored inconvenient evidence. Child beauty pageant photos of JonBenet whipped the case into a judgmental frenzy. Paula Woodward was one of the few journalists who reported the family side of the story. She's still investigating the 25-year conspiracy to convict John and Patsy Ramsey by law enforcement who acted with arrogance, insecurity, incompetence, and benign neglect. In this book, the follow-up to Woodward's award-winning and acclaimed true crime expose, We Had Your Daughter, Woodward explores outstanding questions still swirling around the case. Who wrote the baffling ransom note? What was found in the 11 pages of the exclusive police report summaries backgrounding the Ramseys? And why has this case languished for years? Now, that was a really good book. I read it in a few days. Lots of facts and contradictions from the media that they put in this book. A lot of things that were never released, that we're just learning for the first time. But man, did the media take things and spin it for their narrative. I mean, they had DNA samples, pubic hairs, spit, blood from Patsy, John Andrew, Melinda, and Burke, and some other people that they redacted names from, and they were all exonerated. But the media would turn around and say Patsy refuses to cooperate with police. Patsy will not give a blood sample, but we have the documentation in this book with the doctor's notes and the signatures, the times, the dates, everything. So it's just crazy that they made their own narrative from the start and ignored any evidence that they had. On page 23 in Paula Woodward's book, I mean, it's all listed out. It says right here, at approximately 4:37, Detective Gossage and I met with Patricia Ramsey in the BCSO records section fingerprint photo room. Patricia was cooperative in our requests, but was crying and sobbing, withdrawn, and not speaking. Samples were obtained without incident. A photo was taken and some basic personal information was obtained. She had her attorney present. She cried. She kept asking who killed my baby, but at 4:37, her blood was drawn. At 4:42, she got hair samples taken. At 4:50, fingerprints. And the same thing they did with John Ramsey, the same thing they did with Melinda, and so on and so on. But the headlines would be like, John Ramsey is a pilot and flew the family to Georgia in his plane. He didn't. He did not leave on a plane that day. We don't think there should be cause for undue concern. So they're making the community think that there's not an actual intruder, that there's no killer on the loose, and it's all within the household. And then, I mean, there's just some crazy ones that I did see in here, but, Lou Smit had an 8-hour presentation for the grand jury, and they fought with him to do it. And then last minute, Alex Hunter, who passed away yesterday, November 25th, he was the biggest DA on the case when JonBenet's case started. He passed away at 89 from a heart attack, I believe I read. He didn't want Lou Smit to present his findings. And then last minute, Alex Hunter said he didn't have enough evidence to put the charges of child abuse and involvement with a murder or abuse and neglect on the Ramseys, so they dropped the charges last minute. It's crazy, but I can't find the damn ransom note. Oh my God, I'm wasting your time. But the cool part about in this book, there's a map of all the bedrooms and the staircase and the footprints and JonBenet's supposedly having the sun done, which some claim that could be the prongs on Burke's train set. All right, here's the book. Here's the ransom note. Okay, it says, Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully. We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. We respect your business, but not the country that it serves. At this time, we have your daughter in our possession. She is safe and unharmed. And if you want to see her to see 1997, you must follow our instructions to the letter. You will withdraw $118,000 from your account. $100,000 will be all in $100 bills, and the rest of the $18 and $20 bills. Make sure that you bring an adequate size attaché to the bank. When you get home, you will put the money in a brown paper bag. I will call you between 8 and 10 a.m. tomorrow to instruct you on delivery. The delivery will be exhausting, so I advise you to be rested. If we monitor you getting the money early, we might call you early to arrange an earlier delivery of the money. Sorry, this is hard to read. Of the money and deliver a pickup for your daughter. Any deviation of my instructions will result in the immediate execution of your daughter. You will also be denied of her remains for proper burial. The two gentlemen watching over your daughter don't particularly like you, so I advise you not to provoke them. Speaking to anyone about your situation, such as police, FBI, etc., will result in your daughter being beheaded. If we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies. If you alert bank authorities, she dies. If the money is in any way marked or tampered with, she dies. You will be scanned for electronic devices, and if any are found, she dies. You can try to deceive us, but we warn that we are familiar with law enforcement countermeasures and tactics. You stand a 99% chance of killing your daughter if you try to outsmart us. Follow our instructions and you stand a 100% chance of getting her back. You and your family are under constant scrutiny as well as the authorities. Don't try to grow a brain now, John. You are not the only fat cat around, so don't think that killing will be difficult. Don't underestimate us, John. Use that good Southern common sense of yours. It is up to you now, John. Victory, SBTC. I apologize for some of the wrong pronunciations or pausing, but the handwriting is kind of hard to read, even though I know this note. Now, some will say if you actually know John, that he's not actually from the South. He may have resided in the South, but he was not. He was born more in the North. The $118,000 was the amount of his Christmas bonus that year, or annual bonus. And the bag that they were supposed to have, the adequate size attache, like who uses that word? Which some people say that was the suitcase. That's what the suitcase was being used for. This handwriting matches Patsy's apparently for the most part, but they never really confirmed. And nobody knows what SBTC means. Some say it means save Burke through Christ. Some others say that has to do with the college John went to. So it's weird because who the hell would sit in a house and write a 2.5-page ransom note, right? When usually they're in and out with kidnappings and they have the letters written ahead of time. They knew where the pens were. They knew where the pads were, right in the kitchen. And there was one where the detectives and FBI or forensics noticed that there was one that was used as a practice note. And they found the impressions of the pen on the paper that says Mr. and Miss. And then they ripped it out. To this day, no one knows where it's at. And then they rewrote the letter. And then there has been some speculations that the letter matches a lot of the movie Ransom with Mel Gibson. So if you guys have seen that movie, apparently it comes close. Now, I've heard some stories that the Ramseys saw that movie in theaters or rented it, but then I read somewhere else that they really didn't go to the movies much. So that's a contradicting theory, and I don't have evidence and confirmation on that. But I'm going to read this one more time. Again, it says, Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully. We are a group of individuals that request and represent a small foreign faction. We respect your business, but not the country that it serves. At this time, we have your daughter in our possession. She is safe and unharmed, and if you want her to see 1997, you must follow our instructions to the letter. You will withdraw $118,000 from your account. $100,000 will be in $100 bills, and the remaining $18,000 in $20 bills. Make sure that you bring an adequate size attaché to the bank. When you get home, you will put the money in a brown paper bag. I will call you between 8 and 10 a.m. tomorrow to instruct you on delivery. The delivery will be exhausting, so I advise you get some rest. If we monitor you getting the money early, we might call you early to arrange an early delivery of the money and hence deliver to pick up your daughter. Any deviation of my instructions will result in the immediate execution of your daughter. You will also be denied her remains for proper burial. The two gentlemen watching over your daughter don't particularly like you, so I advise you not provoke them. Speaking to anyone about your situation as police or FBI, etc., will result in your daughter being beheaded. If we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies. If you alert bank authorities, she dies. If the money is in any way marked or tampered with, she dies. You will be scanned for electronic devices, and if any are found, she dies. You can try to deceive us, but be warned that we are familiar with law enforcement countermeasures and tactics. You stand a 99% chance of killing your daughter if you try to outsmart us. Follow our instructions and you stand a 100% chance of getting her back. You and your family are under constant scrutiny as well as the authorities. Don't try to grow a brain now, John. You are not the only fat cat around. So don't think that killing will be difficult. Don't underestimate us, John. Use that good Southern common sense of yours. It's up to you now, John. Victory, SBTC. So that's the ransom note that was found on the bottom of the stairwell that Patsy found the morning of December 20th. She glances over it, sees your daughter's missing, runs upstairs, gets John. He throws clothes on, comes downstairs. They call 911. And that's when hell broke loose. Now, there has been reports that they sent to NASA, I believe, to listen to that 911 call because some claim they can hear a voice in the back saying, like a little boy saying, what did you find? And then John saying, we weren't talking to you. Some say they hear it, some don't, but it was never used as evidence, and they kind of just dismissed it because they could not confirm that that's what actually was being heard. So again, it was unusually long ransom note compared to typical ones. And it was at the bottom of the staircase. The language was rambling, dramatic, and inconsistent. As I said, it was even hard for me to pronounce, mixing threats with oddly polite phrases. The forensic experts compared the handwriting to multiple suspects, including Patsy, but no conclusive matches were ever made. There was a bogus claim. Investigators later concluded the note was not a genuine ransom demand, but rather a staged document written after JonBenét's death. The note is central to the case because it suggests staging, either by someone inside the house or an intruder trying to mislead investigators. Its length and detail are highly unusual, but most ransom notes are not short and direct. Most ransom notes are short and direct. The specific ransom amount tied to John's bonus raised suspicion that the writer had inside knowledge of the family's finances. Investigators collected over 100 samples of Patsy's handwriting to compare against the ransom note. Forensic document examiners identified more than 200 similarities between her writing and the ransom note. Some experts concluded it was highly probable that she wrote the note, while others argued the similarities were not conclusive. Patsy consistently denied writing the note until after her death in 2006. Despite decades of analysis, the author of the note has never been identified. John Ramsey, he also provided handwriting samples. Analysis showed no significant similarities between his writing and the ransom note. He was largely ruled out as the possible author. Patsy called 911 at 5:52 a.m. to report JonBenet missing. Friends and family arrived on the scene, unintentionally contaminating the crime scene. Now, in the books I've read, there were up to 18 or 19 people in that house without being included in law enforcement. That's a lot of fucking people in a crime scene, wiping things down in the kitchen, cleaning things up, moving things around. Now evidence is being tampered with, DNA is being blotched. They're cleaning things with bleach and wiping things down. I mean, that is suspicious, but I know they were probably also trying to help Patsy because Patsy was very clean. And that's a lot. I know the police department didn't have any experience in homicide cases, but use some common sense. Common sense. I mean, I'm not a detective and I know not to do that. So it's weird. JonBenet's autopsy revealed that she died from asphyxia by strangulation and a skull fracture. These findings showed she had suffered both head trauma and strangulation, with the latter identified as the official cause of death. The asphyxia by strangulation was associated with ligature marks on her neck, a severe skull fracture on the right side, which a subdural and subarachnoid hemorrhage. Other injuries, petechial hemorrhages in her eyes and face, common in strangulation. So her eyes were bloodshot, I imagine. Abrasions on her cheek, shoulder, back, and leg. Evidence of vaginal trauma, abrasion and vascular congestion of the mucosa. Now, doctors have written off, and I've seen statements in doctors' letters written and signed saying that she never had vaginal trauma. She was never sexually abused, but she did have a reoccurrence of UTIs, apparently as a little kid now. Sometimes that can go hand in hand with sexual abuse. Sometimes it goes hand in hand with your urethra being too small and it doesn't flush out bacteria. It can be caused by large consumption of chocolate, dehydration, but there has been forms and letters signed off that she never did. The garrote, which was the homemade garrote fashioned from a paintbrush handle, which was tied tightly around her neck. The paintbrush came from Patsy's paint kit, and it was broken and tied. And they found beaver hairs on JonBenet's clothes, but they think that instead of it coming from a fur coat or an intruder, that it came from the paintbrush. Now, that garrote was never really tested at first, and I think that's one of the evidence that finally just got handed over. I mean, that's one of the biggest pieces of that evidence, and it just got handed over, I believe, to get tested. The time of death was estimated late night on December 25th or early morning December 26th. Now, if you've ever seen JonBenet's headstone, it does say Christmas Day. Technically, she died December 26th, so people said, well, why did they put December 25th? And I believe John said that he wanted people to know that bad things do happen on Christmas to people. And it was just a reminder that no one's safe or bad things happen, that it's just a tragedy. The combination of head trauma and strangulation led investigators to debate whether JonBenet was first struck and then strangled or vice versa. The vaginal injury raised questions about possible sexual assault, though the autopsy did not confirm penetration. The garrote suggested deliberate construction, pointing to a staged or intentional act rather than an accident. The autopsy became central to the case, fueling two competing theories. Family involvement theory, suggesting the injuries were staged to cover up another cause. The intruder theory, pointing to the garrote boot print and DNA as signs of an outsider's attack. Despite decades of investigation, the autopsy findings have never led to a definitive suspect. The combination of head trauma and strangulation led investigators to debate whether JonBenet was the first struck and then strangled or vice versa. as I mentioned earlier. Not outright lies, but misleading. The headlines often exaggerated, oversimplified, or implied guilt without proof. And this is a lot of the things that's mentioned in Paula Woodward's book, and it shows the facts versus the headlines, the ridiculous headlines and lies that the media spun out of control to fit their narrative. These headlines shaped public opinion, turning the Ramseys into suspects in the court of public opinion long before investigators had evidence to support such claims. The case became a media spectacle where perception often overshadowed fact. JonBenet's funeral and burial took place in Georgia, where her mother Patsy had grown up and where the family has deep ties. Her funeral was held December 31st, 1996, 5 days after her death on New Year's Eve. She is buried at the funeral was at Peachtree Presbyterian Church in Atlanta, Georgia, with about 500 mourners, including family, friends, and members of the community. Her casket was white, symbolizing innocence, and the service included hymns and remembrances with a focus on her short but bright life. Her mother, Patsy, despite being under suspicion, delivered emotional words about her daughter. The funeral was heavily covered by media, adding to the public fascination with the case. She was buried at St. James Cemetery in Marietta, Georgia. JonBenet was buried next to her half-sister, Elizabeth Ramsey, who had died in a car accident in 1992 at the age of 22. Holds in this, the family chose to lay JonBenet to rest beside Elizabeth and uniting the sisters in death. Her headstone was simple, graved with her name and dates, and often adored with flowers and tokens left by visitors. Now we're going to get into the key figures in law enforcement and the prosecution that involved in the JonBenet Ramsey case, including the Boulder police officers, detectives, district attorneys, and outside investigators. Starting with the Boulder Police Department, you have Officer Rick French, one of the first responders on December 26, 1996. He conducted an initial search of the house, but did not check the basement wine cellar where JonBenet's body was found. Now, I did read where he said he was looking for an outside entrance, so he didn't bother to check the cellar, and the top of the cellar had a latch that he just didn't deal with, and it was dark, and because the door didn't lead outside the house, he just didn't bother. Detective Linda Arndt. She's the only detective from Boulder that was present at the Ramsey home during the morning of December 26th. She later testified that she felt unsafe and she suspected John Ramsey. Detective Steve Thomas, a lead investigator who strongly believed the Ramseys were involved. He resigned in 1998, frustrated with the DA's office, and later wrote a book criticizing the investigation. I have that book. I haven't read it yet. That's on my book list. It's just called JonBenet. Detective Tom Trullo worked on the case and was part of the investigative team that clashed with the DA's office over theories of family involvement versus the intruder. Officer Rick French, again, first responder on December 26, 1996, did not open that basement door. Now, if he would have opened that basement door and Linda Arndt was there and the parents were there, they could have saved some of the DNA evidence. They could have left her in the cellar and had the authorities and the experts come and do what they had to do right there at the crime scene. But instead, the whole house was contaminated. And as soon as John picked her up, which he says as a father, he just wanted to pick her up, hold her, make sure she was okay. It's just a natural instinct. And Police Chief Tom Kobe oversaw the department during the early investigation, later admitted mistakes were made in handling the crime scene. Alex Hunter, who passed away yesterday, November 25th, 2025, was the Boulder County District Attorney during the JonBenet Ramsey investigation, serving from 1972 until he retired in 2000. He became one of the most controversial figures in the case because he chose not to prosecute the Ramseys despite a grand jury recommendation. Hunter's handling of the case remains debated. Some view him as a cautious and principled, others overly hesitant. He retired in 2000, leaving the case unresolved. And again, he passed yesterday, November 20th, 2025, suffering from a heart attack at the age of 89. Later that day, on December 26th, around 1 p.m., John Ramsey and a family friend searched the basement. This family friend was Fleet White. JonBenet's body was found in a wine cellar room. She had a fractured skull and was strangled with a garrote fashioned from paintbrush handle. Initial police response was the Boulder police struggled with securing the scene. Evidence was mishandled and the ransom note was touched by multiple people. With the autopsy findings, again, asphyxia by strangulation and craniocerebral trauma. Evidence suggested possible sexual assault, though this remains disputed. The high-tech boot print is one of the most intriguing pieces of physical evidence in the JonBenét Ramsey case. The suitcase in the JonBenét Ramsey case is one of the most haunting details from the investigation that they found in the basement near where JonBenét's body was discovered. But again, they also found possibly an outline on the suitcase to get out the window, and they also found it on the back of the toilet cover. Back to the suitcase. The suitcase belonged to John Andrew Ramsey, the adult son of John Ramsey's first marriage. Inside the suitcase were a blanket, a stuffed toy, sometimes described as a plush bear, and these items were unusual because they seemed arranged, not just tossed in. The suitcase was positioned near the window, well in the basement, the same area investigators considered as a possible point of entry for an intruder. Some theorized the suitcase might have been intended to carry JonBenét's body out of the house, but she was ultimately left in the basement. The blanket and toy inside raised some questions. Were they placed there to comfort her, or were they simply stored items? The suitcase was examined for fibers, prints, and DNA, but no conclusive evidence linked it to the crime. There was also a Dr. Seuss book in there that was John Andrews that JonBenet liked, so I just wanted to add that in. John Andrew was away at the time of the murder, as we discussed in the beginning of this podcast, and investigators confirmed he had no involvement. The suitcase remains one of the many puzzling pieces of physical evidence that fuels speculation whether an intruder was present or not. The investigators found a boot print from a high-tech brand shoe in the basement. No one in the Ramsey family owned a high-tech boot, which immediately suggested the possibility of an intruder. The print was preserved and documented, but it was partial and did not lead to a definitive match. Early focus fell on the parents, John and Patsy, due to inconsistencies in their statements and the unusual ransom note. Now, here I'm going to interject again. They did not interview John and Patsy until April of 2000, or I'm sorry, no. They did not interview Patsy and John until April of 1997. Sorry, I was getting ahead of myself. April of 1997. So they had December of 96, January, February, March of 1997, and they waited until April. They didn't question them the day that JonBenet was found. They didn't question them when they were taken in for blood samples, hair samples, spit samples, handwriting samples. They didn't do that. They just waited and waited. Meanwhile, they're putting out in the headlines that the parents were uncooperative and refusing to work with the police and refusing to give samples. No, the police just never sat and interviewed them. So if keywords, they did have anything to do with it, they would have had 3 or 4 months to get a story, scripted and memorized and just verbatim. And that's another reason, why the police fucked up so bad. You're supposed to, and they didn't wait to freaking interview Burke, man. They were interviewing him at the friend's house that they shipped him over to on December 26th, the morning of, and the police were over there investigating and questioning Burke without a lawyer or an adult present. So they didn't wait to interview him. They were quick to go over there and say, hey, what happened, blah, 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 blah. But, let's wait 4 months to interview the parents. That to me doesn't make any sense. Why did they wait so long? And this gave John and Patsy enough time to go on 2020 with Barbara Walters. It gave them time to go on CNN with Larry King. And they did all these interviews before they even got interviewed by the police. That is crazy. And again, I'm not saying they did it. I'm just saying the way that the law flowed, they should have been investigated and questioned and interrogated the day of. They should have been the first question, but they went after Burke instead. And I think that's where the whole Burke theory came from. I know in the past they've said that Burke had hit her a few times, once by accident in the face with a golf club, and she had to have plastic surgery. She had a scar. He smeared fecal matter over in her room the day before Christmas or something like that with her candy, and was just very jealous of her. They found that as the motive and they ran with it because it was the only one that made sense. But he said he didn't do it. The evidence exonerated him, and the DNA, there's none of his on the crime scene. So again, when he says, look at the evidence or the lack thereof, you can only go by facts, people. You can't just say he did it just because you want him to be the suspect. And if he did, he did. But if he's saying he wasn't, and I'm not saying he did, and I'm not saying he didn't. I'm just pointing out the facts. But there has been no concrete evidence that Burke did this. There are speculations. There are theories. There are all signs point to yes, but there's no concrete facts. There was other suspected evidence of an intruder pointing to an open basement window, which was above the suitcase, and unidentified DNA found on JonBenet's clothing. The district attorneys involved, like I said, Alex Hunter, oversaw the case during the most critical years. He convened a grand jury in 1998 and 1999, but declined to pursue indictments, citing insufficient evidence. Mary Lacy, the Boulder DA of 2001 to 2009, issued a public apology to the Ramsey family in 2008 after DNA testing excluded them, formally shifting focus to the intruder theory. Dan Garnett was the DA of 2009 to 2018. He continued to review the case but emphasized the need for modern DNA testing. Then here comes Lou Smit. Everybody knows who Lou Smit is. He was the detective that had a record of solving cold cases. I think he solved 200 in his career. He was a veteran detective, came out of retirement to assist Boulder authorities with this case in 1997. He quickly concluded the Ramseys were innocent and championed the intruder theory. Although going into the case, he was a believer that the Ramseys had something to do with it. The contributions that Lou Smit made were he highlighted the basement window as a possible entry point, which he showed crawling in and out of, compiled a detailed suspect spreadsheet with dozens of names. On his deathbed, he handed his daughter a name that he wrote down and said, "Start here." He advocated for DNA testing, which later excluded the family. And his legacy, even after his death in 2010, his work continues to guide private investigators, with his spreadsheet still being used to narrow suspects. His daughters used it. His granddaughters started a podcast, In the Victim's Shoes, I believe what it's called. And they all just want to help get this solved and continue Lou Smit's work. Lou Smit, retired homicide detective who became convinced of the intruder theory, compiled a detailed suspect list. Now, I would love to see this suspect list. I'm sure a lot of it would be redacted. I just think it'd be interesting. That's all. There were so many other people on site in that house. You know, Fleet White was there. He's not an investigator, but he was involved as a witness and critic of the police response that made him a notable figure. He was with John, looking for JonBenet. John found her and yelled and brought her upstairs. There was the Spartan investigations, the private investigators Preston Hawker and Patrick Collis. They were working with John to push for advanced genetic genealogy testing. And from 1997 to 1999, the grand jury convened, but no indictments were issued. Media frenzy painted the Ramseys as suspects, though they maintained innocence. 2008. In 2001 to 2009, there was a shift in theories when Mary Lacy formally wrote a letter saying that they did not do this. They're exonerated. And new DNA testing, as of 2018, gave the shifting focus back to the intruder theory. 2016 to 2025, renewed interest through documentaries, books, and investigative journalism. John Ramsey continues to advocate for advanced DNA testing, frustrated by delays in modern forensic analysis. The case became a true crime touchstone, influencing TV specials, podcasts, and public debates about media sensationalism. JonBenet's image as a child pageant star intensified public fascination, raising questions about privacy and exploitation and justice. Michael Daugherty, current DA, has stated willingness to use advanced DNA testing, but progress has been slow. The private investigators working with John Ramsey has worked with independent investigators using Lou Smit's suspect spreadsheet, pushing for genetic genealogy testing. The case remains one of America's most infamous unsolved murders, symbolizing both investigative failure and enduring mystery. Police versus DA conflict. The Boulder PD leaned toward family involvement, while the DA's office, especially under Hunter and later Lacy, leaned toward the intruder theory. Evidence handling, early mishandling of the crime scene, and ransom note compromised the investigation. The grand jury in 1999 reportedly voted the indictment of the Ramseys for child abuse resulting in death, but the DA, Alex Hunter, declined to sign the indictment, citing lack of proof. Gary Howard Olivier is a convicted pedophile, as we all know, and longtime suspect in the JonBenet Ramsey case. He was known for his disturbing confessions and obsession with the child beauty queen. He was born January 7th, 1964 in California, and his erratic behavior since youth with a record of predatory actions and dark jokes. He lived near the Ramsey home in Boulder, 1996. He had an obsession, and he reportedly carried a photo of JonBenet and wrote a poem entitled Ode to JonBenet. In his prison letters to a friend, he claimed he killed JonBenet, saying it was his fault. He later told investigators he accidentally killed her. And in evidence, despite his disturbing admissions, no physical evidence has ever been tied to him directly to the crime. He served time in Colorado prisons, released to a halfway house in Denver in 2024, but later went missing and was listed as a transient. He's a convicted sex offender with a long history of crimes against children. As of 2025, VA remains a person of interest but has never been charged in her murder. His prison confessions and obsession keep him on investigators' radar, though authorities emphasize that his claims are not proof. Friends such as Michael Vale continue to push investigators to re-examine Olivet's letters and behavior. Now, if you were at CrimeCon in Denver, I discovered from Ashley Banfield's podcast, Drop Dead Seriously, she was interviewing John Ramsey, and they made it known that Gary Olivet was at CrimeCon. And he wanted to apologize to John Ramsey for everything he went through, for all the trauma and tragedy his family endured, but he wasn't going to apologize for saying he falsely murdered JonBenet. But again, he says he did, but there's no evidence to back it up. He did show up. John Ramsey wanted nothing to do with him. Fortunately, it was all handled. He didn't try to meet him in the Q&A. He didn't try to meet him at the meet and greet. I didn't notice him there, but I really wasn't looking for him. But then someone had posted a photo in a private CrimeCon group. I'm like, shit, like he was there. So that's interesting. Then there was a key confession from John Mark Carr. You may remember him from 2006. He was a former school teacher arrested in Thailand. He claimed he was present when JonBenet died and that he loved JonBenet very much. His DNA did not match evidence from the crime scene, and he was released. His confession was deemed false. This case was shaped by Boulder Police Department detectives like Linda Arndt and Steve Thomas, District Attorney Alex Hunter's cautious approach, Mary Lacy's exoneration of the Ramseys, and Lou Smit's persistent intruder theory. Conflicts between police and prosecutors, plus mishandled evidence, remain central reasons why JonBenet's murder is still unsolved. JonBenét Ramsey's story is not just about a crime. It's about a family shattered, community haunted, and a justice system that will still be searching for answers. Nearly 3 decades later, her killer remains unidentified, but her name continues to echo, reminding us of the importance of truth, accountability, and remembrance. I'm going to go through the timeline one more time. December 25th, 1996, Boulder, Colorado. The Ramsey family attended a Christmas party, returned home, and put JonBenet to bed around 9. The morning of December 26, 1996, Patsy found a 2.5-page ransom note on the staircase demanding $118,000. She called 911 at 5:52 to report JonBenet missing. Friends and neighbors arrived, inadvertently contaminating the crime scene. Later that day, around 1, John Ramsey discovered JonBenet's body in the basement wine cellar. She had a fractured skull and was strangled with a garrote made from a paintbrush handle from Patsy's art kit. In the Ramsey home, the crime scene where JonBenet was found, the basement wine cellar became central to the investigation. The basement window, often cited in the intruder theory, as it was found open with a broken window pane that John Ramsey claims he broke a year prior because he locked himself out of the house. The grand jury between 1998 and 1999 convened in Boulder, but did not issue an indictment. The ransom note, with lengthy, unusual, and written on paper from inside the Ramseys' home, that demanded $118,000, the exact amount of John Ramsey's Christmas bonus, had unidentified male DNA found on her clothing, and in 2008, testing excluded the Ramsey family, strengthening the intruder theory. The cause of death was strangulation and blunt force trauma. The possible signs of sexual assault, though disputed, and a garrote fashioned from Patsy's paintbrush. Pineapple was found in JonBenet's stomach, suggesting that she ate something shortly before. Dozens of items, as of 2025, were given from the JonBenet Ramsey case to be retested or newly tested using advanced DNA technology, including genetic genealogy methods. And this is what John Ramsey has been pushing for familial genealogy. Now, not only was pineapple found in JonBenet's stomach, I had read in Paula Woodward's book that they found a mix of fruit cocktail, which has never been talked about anywhere else. It's always that damn piece of pineapple. They found grape skins, they found cherry, they found pineapple, and they can't prove that it was eaten that night or just slowly digesting from the day before. There was a bowl on the table, we all know, with Burke and Patsy's handprints all over it, and that was their favorite snack, milk and pineapple. And the theory goes that Burke hit her over the head with a flashlight for stealing a piece of his pineapple, and then that's when all hell broke loose. And that's just the theory. That's not fact. That's not my opinion. That's just the theory of what has been going around for 30 years now. She did have pineapple in her stomach and grape skin and cherries, but they cannot definitively say when she ate that. And with all the evidence being turned over, I know in 2008, when Mary Lacy had the Long Johns tested, it was an unidentified male. And then years later, they submitted evidence to another private lab and they got back unidentified male DNA that matched the DNA that was unidentifiable in 2008. So two different private labs tested this DNA and it was the same unidentified male. It is in the CODIS system. So if somebody does have a match, it will show up for them. This is the only DNA in the system for the JonBenet case. Dozens of items that were retested involve the Colorado Bureau of Investigation confirmed that the old evidence is being re-examined with breakthrough in DNA technology, while new items from the basement crime scene are undergoing forensic analysis. The unidentified male DNA, the DNA was found on JonBenet's clothing, has been reanalyzed with more sensitive techniques. This has allowed investigators to exclude roughly 24 individuals from Lou Smit's suspect sheet. That's 24 people. That's a lot. So the reason why they thought to test the long johns was because they said if somebody was going to sexually assault her, they're going to pull down her long johns on both sides. And that's where they were able to get the DNA. The items from the wine cellar where JonBenet's body was found, some of which had never been tested, are now part of the renowned forensic effort. Like, why were these things not tested? Like, the Boulder police held on to this shit for so long, and it's like, why? What were they trying to protect? Themselves? Were they embarrassed that they fucked this case up so bad that they wanted to be the ones to eventually save the day at the end, even if it's 30 years later, and then finally solve it so they can have all the glory? Like, I don't understand. JonBenet's garments, including underwear and leggings, have been retested with modern methods to refine DNA. Other household items, while authorities have not publicly listed every item, reports confirm that unspecified evidence from the Ramsey home is included in the 2025 testing batch. Now, who knows? Maybe it's the bowl of pineapple. Maybe it's the flashlight that they didn't find any fingerprints on. Maybe it's the string, the rope. I don't know. The genetic genealogy push John Ramsey and private investigators, Preston Hawker and Patrick Collis of Spartan Investigations, have been pressing authorities to send evidence for state-of-the-art genetic genealogy testing, similar to methods used in the Golden State Killer case. As of late 2025, Ramsey expressed frustration that the justice system has been slow to approve this step. Through reports, media outlets in the mid-2025 reported that roughly 24 individuals, again, were eliminated from the suspect list, using DNA methods narrowing the pool of possible perpetrators. Crazy. It's just insane. When we think of JonBenet, I know it's easy to get lost in the mystery and the tragedy, but it's important that we also remember JonBenet for her laughter, her love for crafts, pets, her joy in singing and dancing. And that's how we honor her, right? It was more than a headline. She still is more than a headline. And she was just a child who loved life. And that is what's important. JonBenet is more than just a cold case, but she is the most popular cold case, I think, in crime history. And I know everybody wants justice and answers in this case to be solved. I know John has refused to have her exhumed, and I guess they have the DNA that they need. So exhuming her isn't going to do a world of difference, but it could. He just doesn't want to. He just wants her to rest and doesn't want to disrupt that. And so there's a lot that goes on in this case. And, some cops reported that they didn't see snow on the ground, so therefore they didn't have footprints. And there's just so many contradictions that if the police would have done their job from the very start and they had the experience. Now, John Ramsey was never mad at the Boulder police for being rookies. He was just mad that they didn't let experts come in and help them. And they were selfish and just kept it all to themselves. So I just, I wanted to do a podcast episode on this because it is the one case besides Gabby Petito's that I know just about everything about and I'm passionate about. And I want this little girl to get answers and to get justice and not have that haunting and hanging over everybody's family members. But that's it. I'm going to jump off here because I have to get ready to pack because I'm going away for Thanksgiving. My throat is a little dry. And this is episode 10, so I thought it'd be great to just do it on JonBenet, and hopefully we'll get some answers soon. And next year, 2026, marks 30 years. Hopefully John will be going to CrimeCon in Vegas, and I would like to see him get the Clue Award, the crime fighting award, because he has fought this for 30 years. So I definitely would like to see him get it. But let me know your thoughts. If you guys can give me an honest review, an honest rating, I'd greatly appreciate it. You can follow me on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook under True Crime Tiff Klein. You'll see the orange and black logo. On December 2nd, I will be on Danny After Dark's YouTube channel talking about books and talking about my podcast. And she was at CrimeCon as well. She will be again in Vegas, and she'll also be in New Mexico next year doing a crime convention. So look forward to that. It's 8 o'clock p.m. on December 2nd, and I'll be with Danny After Dark. So if you haven't caught up on my other 9 episodes, please do so, and stay tuned on my TikTok. I've been doing updates for Anna Kepner. There's not a lot of updates, so I can't really do another episode right now, but I do TikTok videos with just short little things. So stay tuned on that. And again, just don't spread false rumors. Don't jump on the bandwagon. Think for yourself. Think outside the box. And be an advocate, not a conspiracy theorist. So until then, this was True Crime with Tiff Klein. I thank you for listening. Have a great Thanksgiving, and I will talk to you guys next week.